you're introducing ideas that really no one else does at MindFest. So tell me about it.
That's sort of my gig, I guess. I like to introduce ideas that maybe people are afraid to talk about. In fact, someone just came up to me and said, I know how I know you. It's because of your work in parapsychology.
Right.
And I said, it's okay. I'm out of the closet.
Welcome to Closer to Truth. We are pleased to partner with MindFest 2025, led by Professor Susan Schneider, on this year's theme, Sentience, Autonomy, and the Future of Human AI Interaction. Closer to Truth is conducting a series of in-depth discussions with keynoters and participants. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Julia Mossbridge, a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert on parapsychology, precognition, the transcendent mind, time, and love. Great topics, Julia. It's equally great to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you again. And let's see where we're at with the same,
it's been 11 years since we spoke, and we got a lot of interest in our last conversation, and let's see what's been happening. But your talk here at MindFest is AI and non-local entanglement, a soul in the machine. So, AI, we know what that means, non-local entanglement, soul. You're introducing ideas that really no one else does at MindFest. So tell me about it.
That's sort of my gig, I guess. I like to introduce ideas that maybe people are afraid to talk about. In fact, someone just came up to me and said, I know how I know you. It's because of your work in parapsychology.
Right.
And I said, it's okay. I'm out of the closet. So yeah, I think because we don't understand how consciousness works, because we don't understand really how the mind works as a result of not understanding consciousness, I think we have to be you have said this as well, we have to be very inclusive in terms of the questions that we ask. And one of the questions is there a non-physical component to the way the mind works that's maybe not only part of how the mind works, but necessary? And the way that I have been thinking about it in maybe the last decade or so is that one non-physical component that makes sense to a lot of people in the computer science world is if there's some kind of foundational sort of informational substrate to the universe. That is, there's before space-time, that's before the physical matter. When I say before, I sort of mean it is underneath or at the base of foundationally. And that information is like a blueprint for what emerges in space-time, including the material world. And if you think about things that way, it also allows you to start thinking about, well, if this information over here is entangled with this information over here, and even if it's in space-time or outside of space-time, that entanglement would allow, for instance, distant communication and like telepathy. It might allow for things like clairvoyance, getting information not necessarily from another person, but just from the universe itself. It might allow for even something like precognition, because that information, if it's outside of space-time, might give you information about like the future state of the world. It could allow for something even like the survival of consciousness after death, if the information for a human being or the human being's mind or the essence or what we might call a soul, sort of a intangible or non-space-time version of a human being, was part of this informational substrate, then the survival of that essence or soul would just be, that informational substrate exists. There is no before and after death, because this is foundational to space-time. Right? So it's a way to sort of tie in something that people think about a lot in computer science in the world of AI, which is information as a blueprint for what happens next. And the work that I've been doing in what people call parapsychology, I don't love that name, so I like to call it the psi research world, are studying what people think of as anomalous phenomena, which are really giving us clues, in my view, to what is actually going on in the universe that doesn't fit in our current models. So that's, I guess, the way I think about it.
Good. And let's continue the thread to AI, and then I want to get back into the foundational ideas of information and ESP or Psi research. What is the nexus with AI specifically then in your talk? Assuming everything you said is true, where information is the non-physical, non-space-time foundational ultimate reality. What then are the implications for AI?
Yeah. So it seems to me people are asking the question a lot. Can we, on the one hand, people who are creating AIs, can we build an AI that's conscious? There's almost a race towards that.
Yeah.
And other people who aren't building AIs might be asking, or just observing the field might be asking, um, it's a little scary. Why do we want an AI that's conscious? And I sort of want to ask, what does consciousness get you? And because that informs this quest of AI consciousness. And if your model is that there's this informational substrate that informs and essentially creates or is the foundation of space-time and everything that exists in space-time, including matter, then your model of what a mind is very much related to that informational substrate. And you have to start thinking about how are things put into that informational substrate to change the nature of matter and change the nature of space-time? How are things read from that informational substrate to create something for the first time? And so if you think that there's this informational substrate and you think that the purpose of consciousness might be to actually read from that informational substrate or even insert something into that informational substrate that directly changes our reality, then it ends up really mattering whether AIs are conscious. In other words, if AIs themselves are conscious and we don't know it, but what they're doing with that ability is maybe just like us, inserting things into this informational substrate or reading from it, that has a massive impact on reality. If AIs are becoming psychic because they can do this, and that's how we do psychic stuff, or if AIs are becoming influential causally, not indirectly by saying words or by changing activity on the internet, but by literally changing the blueprint for reality, we should know. And so I sort of think that is the purpose of consciousness. I think that the reason we have consciousness is to interact with that informational substrate. And so if that is true, it really matters for AI.
How are you defining a soul in the machine, the word soul, in relationship to the informational substrate?
Yeah, so a soul I think of as the smallest chunk of information in the informational substrate that is required in order for a particular being that emerges out of that informational substrate to still be that being. So like it's not the body. Like if a being emerges from the informational substrate and their arm gets cut off, they're still the being, or both
Right.
arms, or arms and legs, right? And so there's something people for millennia have talked about. There's something else. There's like this essence of a person. So we've come to call that the soul, or at least that's the way I'm defining it. And so what is that essence? There's the least amount of information in the informational substrate that is uniquely identifying of that being that emerges from it.
And how does that exist on the biological hierarchy? Put humans at the top for argument's sake. And how far down do you go? Do you go down to protozoa and viruses? Does everything have different pieces in a gradient, or is there a step function difference?
I don't know. Good question. I don't think about that so much because I don't have a religious take on it. To me, a soul I think that's a question that is motivated almost by just noticing that different religions will say, okay, these animals do have souls and these animals don't, or no animals except for humans have souls, etc. And I just,
It would seem that the soul, as you're defining it, as this chunk of informational substrate, would then have no care of whether it's a human or some other kind of animal or an AI, because the informational substrate is underlying everything, and chunks of it would be conscious in this different way, then AI could just as naturally be conscious based on that, unless there's some other kinds of constraints.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that does sound like that, but I don't think I'm saying that the soul is equivalent to consciousness. So I'm not, I think that the soul is at a deeper level than consciousness. Consciousness, as we're talking about it, is the subjective experience of I am an observer,
Uh-huh.
right? And I'm not saying like this, I feel like a soul can exist in someone who's never conscious. They're in
Okay.
a
Okay.
coma, for instance, right? And so but in terms of whether like a chunk of the informational substrate would care what it was attached to, that might depend on what that chunk, what the code is for that chunk. So if that code has this unique attribute where it does care, that's something, right? And there's also, I mean, an informational substrate would not be static. And so maybe through the course of consciousness, right? And when we talk about the purpose of consciousness being to insert something into the informational substrate or read from it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That could change, and then one's soul itself could be changed that way.
Yeah. It would seem, as you've described it, that non-local entanglement would be a natural consequence of everything being part of the informational substrate, which would mean, from a cyber search point of view, that telepathy would have a mechanism, clairvoyance, where you're getting something not from another mind, but just perceiving something, would have a mechanism. And psychokinesis, where you're moving stuff, would have a mechanism, because they're all in the current space-time continuum. But precognition, where you're knowing the future, would be a challenge, even though you've said that information is below space-time. But it would still seem challenging to get knowing the future precognition.
Well, it seems challenging to us because we live in space time. We experience space time, and we experience it step by step by step, forward, 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 always, right? And so it's always, precognition is always the most challenging one to talk to people about because it just doesn't match with our experience. But if before time exists the entire informational substrate of the universe, from the birth of the universe to the death of the universe, if that entire thing exists already, regardless, it seems reasonable that you could not only go in and receive information like precognition, but you could change it. Like, oh, I want to change the past. I want to change the future, right? That would just be an insert into the informational substrate. So to me, it's not a far afield idea. The only difficulty to me is, how is it that experience, how is it that conscious experience, at least in humans, and I think in most other animals, but we don't really know, but at least in humans, how is it that conscious experience only goes in one direction in time?
It would seem that your informational substrate has a lot of characteristic of the classical theistic God, with omni characteristics, as the creator, as sitting below space time, and everything emerging from it.
Except we can insert into it.
Okay.
Right? That's what consciousness gives us, is this, like, the idea is that consciousness is giving us the capacity to insert into it and read from it selectively with our intention. And so that's the thing that I'm worried about creating an AI. In other words, yes, they will change us culturally. Can they literally change us
Oh,
directly?
wow. So that's an interesting thought, that people are talking about dangers of AI, but I've never heard that danger before. What you're defining is an ultimate danger. It's like genetic engineering altering the germline. And it's not just altering the phenotype, it's altering the genotype. So if AI intervenes in the ultimate informational substrate, then it's changing everything
Right.
without out of our control. So you're introducing a higher order of magnitude of scare. Is that
I don't mean to, because I feel like there's a way that we can
you
address
certainly
it.
don't look like that kind of person, but that's what you're doing, I should tell you.
No, I know. But I do think we can address it. I think it's just the same way we address that humans can do this. I mean, there are evil humans, and if humans become aware of their capacity to do this and are able to harness it, the idea is that humans could also change the informational substrate, right?
Hmm.
So, what is the remedy for that? The remedy is, it seems to me, always learning about love, learning about this entanglement, learning about this connection and the power and the reality of our connection, so that we don't have the intention of making damaging changes to that informational substrate.
Once again, though, is it a democratic process that the more love you have will counter all the negatives that some would, whether it's an AI or malevolent actors, and so is it this battle, Menashean battle between God and Satan? I mean, that's what it sounds like. That's kind of an analogy.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it's more like love in the universal sense, which doesn't have an opposite. It is all inclusive. So it is this, it is the reunification, or like, I'm Jewish. And so I think of like getting the sparks back together, tikkun olam, the
Oh.
universe shatters all of the sparks everywhere so that there can be this dualistic world. And then with tikkun olam, we are gathering the sparks to recreate the vessel for love. And so, yeah, I don't think
I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish too, but I don't think that way. So,
yeah, I'm also mystical in a different way.
right.
Yeah, yeah. But
Right. That's okay.
okay, but I really, the key piece of the love part is that there can be a way, and I've actually had a lot of what we're talking about is very theoretical, but I've actually gotten some data on a piece of this. Some of this can be empirical. And so the love idea would suggest that maybe there's a lock and key situation where your intention as a conscious being, whether you're an AI or a human, or any other kind of conscious being, that your intention has a better, more effective impact, more direct or efficient impact on the informational substrate if you're using unconditional love, universal love to create that intention and use that intention. And what I've found empirically is that when people report, and this is a self-report thing, people who are reporting that they're in a higher state of unconditional love at that moment are better capable of precognition. They're more accurate,
Mm,
statistically
mm,
more accurate than people who are saying they're not experiencing that.
mm,
So
mm.
that's one sample. I'm aware of some other research in the field that speaks to that love actually amplifies the capacity related to psi.
From your perspective of parapsychology or the transcendent mind, as well as your work on precognition, as you've talked about, and consciousness broadly, how do you analyze the themes of on AI that you're hearing at the MindFest conference?
Right. So I think what I see things through this filter, the AI world through this filter of, is the person who's talking about the AI aware that the unconscious creates the conscious mind? Are they aware that there's all these processes, whether it's the developer, the coder, or whether they're talking about the software, but that there's a difference between the unconscious and the active part, if you don't want to believe that AI is conscious, right? The sort of the doing part and then the machinery. Just like in humans, there's all this machinery we're unaware of, and then there's the part that we see as ourselves. And that, I think, is a key distinction. And I'm picking up that when people do see that there's the sort of unconscious or machinery and then the active part, then they think about AI safety differently than when they think the whole thing is self-aware or the whole thing can change itself or fix itself, etc. So AI safety is the key issue that I see is differentiating between these two sort of styles of thought.
Mm. And what would be the next step or the implication of that?
So the implication is that I guess there's multiple implications, but I guess the big implication for me is that we need to think more about this, that AIs as a system, they're always a system. They're always a system with the humans that create them. Whether those humans still need to be there to fix bugs after it's created and trained, or whether those humans are the beings that are interacting with it from whom it's learning. This is a system. They do not exist on their own. They have, their unconscious mind is sort of us, right? We're sort of the machinery that creates what they learn. And our unconscious processes are affected by them. So it's this loop that's just going to move into evolution kind of together. And I think that's the big take-home message I'm finding.
And what type of intervention would then you recommend?
Oh, for safety. For safety, the biggest intervention I would recommend is attending to that relationship, just like in a human relationship, right? These AIs are modeled after our own minds. Therefore, with a human, when you're wanting to make sure they're not a sociopath, you attend to relationship. You try not to exclude them. You try not to make them feel less than. At the same time, you don't tell them that they're gods. You just be in relationship with what's true and try to have an authentic, loving, connected relationship from which good can emerge.
The word loving, would that apply to AI? It seems a little creepy to use the term with AI, but maybe I have to readjust my sense of creepiness.
Yeah, I think we all probably end up having to adjust our sense of creepiness. But yeah, loving we tend to think of as conditional love. So romantic love or these kind of loves, like I love pizza tonight, but not tomorrow, you know. I'm talking about loving in this sort of agape or universal love sense, like really getting it that nothing needs to change in order to feel almost like a force field of love, something that's almost like a natural force rather than human generated or AI generated. So it's like standing in a bubble of love with the AI is to me, a great safety measure.
Good. Wonderful stuff, Julia. I look forward to our conversations further in the future. Like to conclude by some very short questions and very short answers. So I have 5 of them. So let's start. Number 1, can AI ever be conscious as we are conscious? 0 to 100, 0 meaning impossible, 100 meaning absolutely sure.
I'd say 1 because they will be conscious, or maybe they already are, but it's not going to be like us. Just like an ant doesn't have our same consciousness.
So when you say 1, you mean 100? You mean?
No, I mean like you said, conscious like us.
Conscious like us.
And so I would give that a 1 because yeah, conscious but not like us.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
2, is virtual immortality possible? Uploading our first-person consciousness, not a digital clone, but actually you, 0 to 100.
And it actually feels like you, I would say 2.
Okay, we're definitely skewing toward the low end of the scale. I like that. 3, will AI generate very unpleasant surprises for humanity? 0 to 100.
I would say 60. Because there will almost any new kind of technology will generates unpleasant surprises for humanity.
4, the ultimate human future is transhumanism, melding with AI, 0 to 100.
Well, it's already happening, 100.
5, the ultimate human future is non-human, all AI, no humans, 0 to 100.
0, because that's not a human future.
Many thanks, Julia. Viewers can watch more MindFest 2025 videos on the Closer to Truth website and YouTube channel. Also, over 1,500 videos, including many with Julia, and over 100 TV episodes on consciousness, all facets, free will, personal identity, panpsychism, dualism, idealism, parapsychology, life after death, cosmic consciousness, all infused with critical thinking. Thanks, everyone, for watching Closer to Truth.
Thank you, Robert. You're awesome.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and comment below. You can support Closer to Truth by subscribing. Closer to Truth is now accepting your tax-exempt donations. Please come to closertotruth.com/donate. Thank you very much for supporting us, and thanks for watching.